Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios today. Again, the major issue which we'll be discussing in our program is about the future of Afghan situation. What exactly is happening is pretty interesting as the US forces, they have started bombarding the Afghan Taliban, though there was a proper contract that they won't do that. But the moment their soldiers in fact left the Afghan soil, their support for the Afghan forces started in this particular form. And they are claiming that they killed many, but now the resistance has started. Having said that, the Taliban are still controlling most of the area, and they are making sure that the main central areas should be in their control through choking the main roads which are carrying the supplies. Perhaps now we have also learned that they have shut down the electricity going to the major cities, and so on and so forth. Earlier, I in fact saw a video in which many dozens of huge tanker trucks, they were carrying fuel for the city and perhaps for the forces also. They were not burnt, but all of their fuel was leaked and it was spread. The point is that now they are practically controlling the major areas. You talk about the border with Pakistan or Tajikistan or other Central Asian states, or you talk about the border for the first time, that particular area, I'm talking of Badakhshan, that in fact touches China. That is under their control. Even when they were in power for 4 or 5 years, they were not controlling this particular area, including Panjshir. But now this is also in their control, and now the Russian support is very, very visible for the Afghan Taliban. So now that is again going to be another Cold War kind of a situation between the US, where they are supporting the Afghan forces, and the Russians, who are practically supporting the Afghan Taliban. So another conflict zone again supported by two superpowers. Where is it going to lead? What exactly is going to happen? That is a million-dollar question. As far as the people who were the support staff of the Americans, whether in the form of translators or otherwise, they have been evacuated. Most of them, their number is in thousands now, about $100 million that has been committed by the US President, Mr. Joe Biden, to facilitate them and to bring them into USA and settle them. So a lot is happening on ground. But before I introduce you to my guest, our production team has prepared a package. Let's watch that.
Afghanistan, which seldom saw an actual phase of peace and tranquility in its intra-state political, economic and community domains, is on the verge of another civil war calamity. The Afghan government, which proves to be a failure in implicating its writ in the traditional as well as non-traditional security domains of Afghanistan in the absence of US-led NATO forces, finding a way to cover its own created fiasco by playing the blame game against Pakistan. Most recently, Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan, in the International Regional Connectivity Conference hosted by Uzbekistan, rebutted the allegations of President Ashraf Ghani that Pakistan is backing the Taliban's violent insurgency in Afghanistan. Taliban insurgents' aggressive progress has seized landlocked Afghanistan's strategic border crossings with Tajikistan, Iran, China and Pakistan, leading to a challenging security situation for Afghanistan as well as for regional countries. The 28th report of UN monitoring team showed increasing cross-border terrorist threats to Pakistan from Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, operating from Afghan soil, endorsing Pakistan's strong concerns regarding the TTP's operations from Afghanistan. To counter such grave situations, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and Pakistani Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, in their recent meeting in China, agreed to take joint actions to tackle the terrorist spillover from deteriorating security situation in Afghanistan and prevent Afghanistan from falling again into being a hotbed for terrorism. Afghanistan government and Taliban must settle their differences and should tread towards the peaceful path of rebuilding war-torn Afghanistan by cooperating with neighboring countries, so that Afghanistan as well as the whole region could feel the spirit of positive peace.
Now to talk about this, we have with us in our studio on my right is Saddam Hussein Saab. He's an expert on foreign affairs and international relations. Thank you so much, Saddam Saab, for your time. And we also have with us Brigadier retired Said Nazir Saab, Senior Analyst. Brigadier Saab, pleasure to have you after a long time in the show, so thank you so much for your time as well. And we'll also be talking to Dr. Riffat Hussein, and he's going to join us on the telephone, who's a Senior Strategic Analyst. He's going to join us in a little while. But let me start off from you, Brigadier Saab, if you allow me.
Yeah,
Brigadier Saab, you exactly know what's going on right in Afghanistan, and the kind of situation that seems to be developing, or rather has developed. It looks like as if a civil war is practically happening now?
Well, of course, as far as the situation, the way it is unfolding, and the situation is changing day by day. It's a very fluid situation, which we call it in the military strategy.
Correct?
There are many actors, and every actor has his own goals and objectives, and he wants to achieve it by any way. So the overall aim of peace in Afghanistan, that is the main casualty in the whole process. That is one. Second thing is that why a sitting government is bent upon by distributing arms and creating militias and then taking out the processions, and they say that we want to fight. How much they have fought for 20 years, rather 40 years.
Yes.
Is fighting not enough? Is this sense not prevailing?
And what have they gained?
And what they have gained,
Yes.
the end game. And more so, if you fight for another 10 years, even then you have to again negotiate and start from the table, whatsoever should come. That is one aspect. Second aspect is that the way the American forces, the Biden administration announced that they will be leaving by 9/11 this year. And after that, the Taliban memento, which the American journal is calling it the strategic momentum, that has started. And this strategic momentum was known that it will be prevailing, because the major deterrent, that was the American air power. That air power was removed. The way it was removed, then Taliban were free to have that sort of onslaught on the
because when you talk
front
about the ground forces, British
And
Saab,
third-
they are practically surrendering. I mean, look at the number of soldiers who entered Pakistan, and we'll
And
definitely
even to
return them with grace.
Tajikistan-
But forces, when you talk about forces, you have yourself fought. Do you think a soldier should retrieve this way, sir, running into another country, or fight for the glory of his country? So we have seen what they have done. Forget about the training. I was surprised to know that during the last 20 years, Brigadier Saab, the US has spent $86 billion
Exactly.
on their defense forces, and at the end of the day, this is what they've achieved.
Yeah,
Cowards.
And moreover, these forces have been trained by the Germans, by the Australians, by the French, by the Americans, and all their skills of NATO that has gone into their training.
Skills, assets and money and everything.
And money and everything, equipment and everything. And they are leaving the equipment. So if I talk of the three-pronged synergy in the Taliban's approach towards the Afghanistan endgame, probably that is one diplomatic, that the Taliban are very proactive as far as engaging the neighboring countries.
Correct.
And especially their agreement with the Americans. That was the first seal which they had on the Afghan fate. Second thing is that their military strategy, that they have encircled the main capitals, especially provincial capitals and the Kabul. And why they are not marching on Kabul or on the provincial capitals? Because they want to starve out all those forces who are fighting against them.
Right.
Because Afghanistan is a landlocked country.
Absolutely.
And if you have got controlled all of the peripheries, all of the corridors, and of the in and out routes, so naturally that will be the final game coming in. Third thing is that the Ashraf Ghani government want that the Taliban should march on Afghanistan, because he can then spring the issue of legitimacy and acceptability in the international arena. But Taliban is wise enough that they are not marching on and they don't
On Kabul,
want to,
ma'am, they're waiting. I mean, this is what they call the wait and see strategy.
Yes, they don't want to have that legitimacy issue again.
All right.
So that is their one vulnerability, which Ashraf Ghani want to, that they should commit. And third thing I must talk is that the political approach which they have adopted, recently they talked with all the political dispensation of Afghanistan. And of course, that repo has been achieved to an extent that probably if they are having a deal, if that 90 days ceasefire is achieved, so then they will be having deal with these political figures who will be staying there, who have got the stakes, and who are the real stakeholder in Afghanistan, not the Ashraf Ghani government or some.
I mean,
So
Ashraf
these
Ghani
things are very
has no more legitimacy as far as the Taliban are concerned, or so many other factors. I would say they still believe that. I mean, they don't even take him as the president. Now coming to you, Saddam, one important area. Interestingly, I was reading a very a story regarding the offer of the Afghan government to Gulbuddin Hikmatyar to use his troops and his forces and his part basically, and they said that we'll supply you with arms and everything, just go after the Taliban, which he refused. A wise decision, because everyone knows what sort of a future seems to be like in Afghanistan. The future of the current government, God knows, perhaps one day we'll learn that they have flown out of, or they have ran away from Afghanistan. They don't have those kind of stakes. But when you talk about certain other major figures, they all believe in talks and they believe in no violence policy basically. Do you see that in the future at some stage, if the government agrees for the peace, because we are looking for the peace process, but it seems that everyone is trying to achieve their own objective and there seems to be a direct conflict of interest. There is no conversion, rather a lot of diversion in their ideas, in their ideological, I would say, philosophy as well. That's a perfect recipe for disaster, sir, instead of the peace process. Your take.
Yeah. I recently wrote an article about this. I analyzed the Afghan end game in the context of the game theory. So, except for the Ghani and his team, I guess there is somehow the convergence of interest, because the Taliban and the opposition camp, which includes Abdullah and the likes, they all want a role in the future equation. They want peace and they want a role in the whichever administrative setup they agree on. So I guess this could be a convergence point to start with. But there is a mistrust and there is a history. Who should trust whom? So the Taliban are not opening up much about what could be, how would be the future picture of Afghanistan, how would they deal with the women rights and freedoms. And the opposition camp, which is led by Abdullah, is also uncertain, as if the Taliban would rule. So what will be their role in the whole equation? If the Taliban are dominant, so what will they be doing in the whole scenario? And secondly, there is a big question on the elections. So if there is a setup and an interim setup, but then eventually they would go
First
for
of all,
election.
there is no provision in their system for the interim government. That is one problem.
Exactly.
And secondly, there seems to be another problem, that the Taliban now, they are talking from a position of strength, sir.
Yes.
They won't settle down without controlling the majority. And perhaps even Abdullah or the people from the northern lines or the current government, I mean, they have to see where can they adjust now. Do you see that kind of an adjustment happening, or you believe that Taliban, once they'll take over, then it is going to be their call?
I don't think so. This can happen because this is a global village, and there should be an international acceptance and things like that. So the Taliban, if they do the things which you just said, it will be kind of like snatching the Kabul regime, which would be unacceptable to Pakistan, to Iran, and the Central Asian states, and America and China. So I guess all the regional players and international players want a government representative of all the ethnic groups and all the different ideologies, because they have seen what happened in the past. If one group's come, it becomes the dominant, and it misuse or abuse the power. So the end game should be towards a representation of all the groups and all the
That's
ideologies.
an ideal case scenario,
Yeah.
perhaps where everybody is going to sit and they will talk about it and they'll decide. But that equation seems to be pretty far away.
But in the short run, I guess the Taliban would want to have an upper hand. They can talk like in the long run that what could be the setup or administrative setup in the long run. But in the short run, they clearly have an upper hand.
But
And why would they give the upper hand to someone else like Abdullah or other groups? Because they have fought and they consider
they believe
this their
they have
victory.
achieved it, they have claimed
Exactly.
it, this is what they have earned over a period of
Yeah.
time. So, and they have lost so many lives also. Look at the number of Mujahideen who have been killed by the American forces. I mean, I still remember the statement from George W. Bush that we'll smoke them out. So they came here to smoke them out. They couldn't, they were smoked back actually.
Yeah.
And interestingly, after 20 years, whatever objectives they had in their mind, nothing was achieved. Now, we've also been joined in by Dr. Riffat Hussain Sahab. Dr. Sahab, Assalamu alaikum. Dr. Riffat, Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me, sir?
I can hear you.
Okay, Dr. Saab, thank you so much for your time. Now, since we're talking about the Afghan peace process, looking at the current scenario, the current happenings, the latest developments, whether you talk about the support of the Americans for the Afghan forces in the aerial bombing, or claiming that XYZ number of Taliban have been killed, and then the Taliban again, getting hold of more areas, choking the right spots so that the supplies basically on all the required essential items that any city would require. Either you talk about the water supply or you talk about the electric supply. So they have been also cut down. Now, do you see the Taliban really taking over in the future, sir, or perhaps the resistance from the Afghan forces along, as General Mackenzie has said, that we'll keep on supporting them till the official date? But what after the date? Sir, your take.
Well, Faisal, we need to define what is the meaning of taken over by the Taliban. By takeover, if you mean physical control over, then that's not going to happen anytime soon, because the countervailing force, which is the Afghan security and the police and the commandos, which have been trained by the Americans, they will do their best to thwart Taliban's attempt in case they move towards taking over Kabul or the major urban areas of the Taliban. Now, so we need to be very careful when we say that the Taliban are just about ready, they are advancing towards the major cities and the takeover is imminent. I don't think that is going to happen. If the Taliban want that, then they will have to overcome the heavy military resistance, the anti-Taliban forces. That's one. The second point I think which is very relevant is Taliban are playing what Gramsci has called the position of strength game, position of war game. They want to extend their influence in such a way, over the crossing inside Afghanistan or outside Afghanistan under the virtual control. So once they have established that kind of a stranglehold over the whole of Afghanistan, then they would like to go for some kind of a power sharing arrangement. And you are absolutely right that power sharing arrangement would be dictated by the Taliban, because they militarily and on the ground situation favors them completely. Now the critical question is, what are the Taliban after? Would they like to wait till such time more situation emerges inside Afghanistan, or they will make a push? And the underreported thing is the Taliban commanders have suffered heavy losses during the 3 or 4 months, and and some of the areas that were virtually taken over by have been smashed back down by the Afghan security forces. So there is a seesaw balance that prevails inside Afghanistan, and I think the Taliban are not willing to burn their bridges with the international community. One, and number two, they think that even if they were to militarily take over all of Afghanistan, the question of legitimacy and viability of their rule will haunt them. So I think because of these reasons, the Taliban would like to extend their operational control over certain areas and consolidate that control, and then they will go for some kind of a negotiated or power sharing arrangement. That, at least to me, seems to be the scenario that is unfolding.
Sir, one more fact. That is about the overall status of the Afghan forces. Because when we hear that 350,000 Afghan forces trained by the NATO and the Americans, they have spent over $86 billion on them. Best possible equipment has been given to them. Best possible training, according to Mr. Joe Biden, who believes that they are very well trained. But at the end of the day, sir, the way they are surrendering, despite having that kind of a number, that is 350 versus the Taliban, that is not even more than 70,000 according to reports. Few believe that there are different factions together, so max number is around 70,000. But what I'm saying is that the moral character seems to be missing, sir. Look at the number of Afghan soldiers and officers, I think officers and rest of the soldiers, around 3 dozen entered Pakistan. And now we'll be, in fact, sending back with grace, obviously. But sir, if this is the morality, if this is the strength, then God forbidden, sir, it seems that the Afghan forces, either they'll join hands with the Afghan Taliban and would ask for mercy, or perhaps they would just keep on surrendering or fighting. I mean, in the long run, seems to be a very, very different equation, sir. Very different option for them. Do you agree?
I agree with you partly, because the situation on the ground seems like it favors Taliban. But in reality, none of the major cities, including Kabul, which is the capital, has fallen to the Taliban. And the Ghani government, one reason why the Ghani government seems so confident is because of the pronouncement not only that he has made of the resistance being organized, but also you have to look at, it's not just the Afghan security forces, but the other factor is the non-Taliban anti-Pashtun alliance, which is making waves. And the second resistance, there are many people who are involved in this, including Rashid Dostum and Ismail Khan from Herat, and so many people, Atta Mohammed from Balkh. They all have agreed. There is a tacit understanding that Taliban should not be allowed to come near the urban areas of Afghanistan, including Kabul. So the Taliban are very smart players. They also know their limitations, that what will be acceptable to the international community, or under what scenario would there be their military takeover, which I agree will only happen if there is a massive meltdown of the Afghan security forces, and there are no indications, at least as far as I can see, that is something which is likely to transpire.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saab, for your kind comments. Thank you once again. British Saab, now another important factor, and that is about the adversaries of the Taliban, whether in the form of Dostum or the Northern Alliance or otherwise. Do you think, sir, just like Hikmat Yar was approached by the Afghan forces, do you believe these warlords, let me use this word, they are warlords, there's warlords, because I've also learned that around 12,000 to 15,000 strong men are with Rashid Dostum. That is the number of kind of, let's call them troops with him. So that kind of resistance is there in the Uzbek side, for example, or otherwise, and they join hands and financed by the Western world. Do you think these factions could actually create a problem for the Taliban, along with the support of the Afghan forces and the money the Americans are going to pour in, sir?
Yes, of course, that is one of the worrying factor, and Taliban are considering that, rather they are in knowledge of that. Who is swinging in which
because that
direction.
suits the Americans, it suits the Indians,
That suits the Indians,
yes,
and that suits the
that particular bloc.
The present government of Afghanistan,
exactly.
whatsoever it is.
Exactly.
The thing is that, look at the military strategy. That is, the Talibans have control over all the peripheries and all the corridors and the choke points.
But those could be taken back also, sir, with severe offensive.
And once they are controlling that, so naturally, if the Uzbeks are looking towards Uzbekistan, or Tajiks towards Tajikistan, or somebody else, Turkmen towards Turkmenistan, or the Northern Alliance from Iran, etc.
Yeah.
So what they have done, they have already captured that area which were their power basin of the Northern Alliance.
So strategic,
they have already
operations. They started from the northern side.
Exactly. So they have choked it. That is one. Second thing is, if that is happening, because what they have done, they have imposed a sort of siege mentality on the Afghan forces. And that siege mentality means that you are on defensive, not on offensive. That's what the military strategy tells us. Second thing is, that if the Afghan government or its forces moves out of the fortress defenses, so naturally they cannot. Previously, when the American forces were there, 150,000, they couldn't defeat the Taliban.
Exactly, exactly.
So that strategy will not suit them to completely evac them from
without
those
any
areas.
air support.
Yes, air support, and that is also questionable. Though there are
How
guns.
long will it continue?
Yes.
Because according to General Mackenzie, sir, when the second question was put
But
to
he
him,
said that I will not commit.
I will not, sir. What is that supposed to mean?
Oh, it means they are also.
It has
keeping
not
their
been decided yet.
option
A, or
open.
secondly, they will keep the option because they can't
Option.
afford to make more enemies now.
Exactly. So that is another aspect. And third aspect is that Taliban have got, I suppose, some sort of political understanding with some of the political groups in Afghanistan itself, like the way they approach Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, Hizb Islami, but he refused to side them. So this chipping in will start, or this chip out will start in Afghanistan. As far as
Do
the
you believe
militias
Gulbuddin
or
Hekmatyar
warlords
still
are
enjoys that kind of, an authority which once he used to?
No, he has been weird out quite some, and he was in oblivion, and then he came, of course. But still, he has got some clout, which could be counted because there are so many facts. More so, as
You know,
far
if
as
the government has approached him, that means that he has that kind of a clout.
he was on
Yes.
the government benches, but
Absolutely.
in a way, but silently or you can say latently. But now he is open on that aspect. As far as the warlords are concerned, are the those people, militias which were there previously, they were being paid, they were being equipped, they were being armed, even by the American forces, as well as their equipment was with them. What the Americans are now doing, that the equipment which have been captured by the Taliban, through this air bombing, they want to destroy that.
This is exactly
So
what they're
it
doing, yes.
means that whatsoever the equipment is there, slowly and gradually the Afghan forces will be deprived of their vital equipment, especially the mobility. And once the mobility is not there, I suppose then that is not the game for a conventional
And how do
force,
you see this,
for
the
conventional
Russian
force to
support
prevail.
element, sir?
Yeah, that is a very important aspect. Russians, because the Taliban have approached Russia, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan, because that is the soft underbelly of Russia. So that is the approach towards the Russia.
And they have the
But
military
are
bases there as well, sir.
They are worried regarding the RSS, the Daesh, for the reason that Daesh has got its roots in Syria, and then from Baghdad they came to the Khorasan chapter in Afghanistan, and there
Do
they
you
were
think
supported.
this could actually get
No.
somewhere in Chechnya?
They are somebody's, it's boys. Oh, the way Karzai used to say that they have been supported by through the air power of Americans. And more so, even their parliamentarians were saying that they have seen so many supplies going to them. So if they are used against China or Russian interest in the region, so probably now I go to that theory that non-state actors is now a currency to be used by a superpower against other. Previously, the regime change or destabilization used to occur through the other means by the CIA and others. But now this non-state actor is another factor which has come into their hand, and they are using
That
it.
is what is very important, because Saddam, I remember when the Syrian issue started, 2011,
Yeah.
and the problem in Iraq was already going on. Then we learned the rebels are there. So I used to read a lot about it, and we thought that perhaps they are from the Kurdish side. Yes, they were, but not all of them. These were the people who were brought in from various parts of the world. Initially, they were called rebels, and then we got to know that something with this name of ISIS, Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or IS, or Daesh, or Boko Haram, another faction in Africa, or perhaps so many other. I mean, we got to know about it. They were always there, but they were like, they appeared on the surface. Now, those mystery helicopters we used to talk about, or rather the former Afghan President Hamid Karzai used to call, and wrong bombing by the Americans, and the dropping of the equipment in the wrong areas. I mean, we all know
Even
what was
their
going on.
evacuation.
Exactly.
Once the Taliban used to prevail on it, they will evacuate.
So the point is now that support is there and will remain there, because non-state actors, they have a certain task to do, and because they know nothing except for fighting.
But I guess
So
the
what
approach is
set a role? Because the Afghan Taliban really want them out. Afghan Taliban do not have any design beyond the borders of Afghanistan. The Afghan Taliban do not want and do not believe in this khilafat and this kind of a concept.
indigenous movement,
So how do you see that particular part?
To me, the role of China and Russia will be significant in this regard, because they want stability in the region, and they, frankly speaking, they don't want they don't care what kind of administrative setup or who rules the Kabul or who rules Afghanistan. Their main interest is stability in the region. And the Central Asian states have a pact with the Russia, the collective security something. So it means what the Russia says, Vladimir Putin says, the Central Asian states will say aye to the nod of Putin. So the Central Asian state, Russia, China, they have one interest to have stability in the region, to maximize the economic gains, and BRI is there and CPEC is there. So they are looking for a stable the government, whether the Taliban are in a dominant position, because seeing the ground situation, the ideal administrative setup is not the goal. The goal is stability, and over the time the things will evolve. Maybe it's also wishful thinking. So the Taliban, to me, would eventually be a dominant factor in the administrative setup, which we
when
are
you talk
seeing
about
in
the
short
administrative
run.
setup, sir, majority or perhaps the current governments or the current people in power, they believe about having democracy. Taliban do not. First, so the basic structure, there's going to be an issue. They believe in shura. I mean, that's a similar kind of concept like a parliament, but it's different. I mean, they appoint the shura members rather than they being elected by the people. And secondly, sir, the Islamic State of Emirates, this is the concept. So I do not know the kind of version of Islam they will implement, but that is going to be the Wahhabi version, basically, it is like in Saudi Arabia. But two more important areas. So will that be acceptable to the people of Afghanistan? And what sort of an influence, if it is imposed through power or otherwise, through democratic process, at the end of the day, the kind of effect on neighbors like Pakistan and Iran?
These things, I guess, are open to the talks. These are in the agenda items of the intra-Afghan talks. But we should wish that intra-Afghan talks move on and constructive, because there's a lull at the present. Though we are having the positive signals from the both sides, but in reality we don't have anything so far. So these things, how will be the administrative setup, will be a democratic or Islamic, or what kind of Islamic interpretation will be implemented. It is open to the talks. And I guess all are the representative of Afghans, the Abdullah and other groups and the Taliban all represent the Afghan people. So if they agree on a certain setup or a certain interpretation of Islam, so the neighbors, I guess, shouldn't care, because that is their internal issue. So if they agree on a certain interpretation,
there has
of
to be
Islam,
the internal issue, but if the
yes,
fallout factor comes on the other countries, then one has to have a contingency plan in place, sir.
You see, there is, in Arab countries, there's certain interpretation of Islam, and the rules and regulations, and the punishments are Islamic. But the international world will be worried about the freedoms and rights. They don't worry about the Islam.
Women rights, perhaps, is one of the issue.
The Sohail Shaheen is already saying that they will secure and they will grant all women rights and all freedoms within the ambit of Islam. So if that's happening, if that happen, I guess there should be issue for neighbors, unless there is a negative spillover.
Absolutely, but again, there is another very important factor, sir. Since we were talking about the non-state actors, the role of Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, sir, definite enemy of Pakistan. Most of their, rather the top notch of their leadership that is in Afghanistan. Do you think that there is a difference between the Afghan Taliban and the Pakistani Taliban? Is it a brand that can work together also? Or do you believe that if in case the factions from the TTP, they join hands with the Afghan Taliban, will it be a threat for Pakistan? Or Pakistan has enough influence on the Afghan Taliban to look after the affairs and perhaps, tell them that, on the best of the Indians, if you are trying to destabilize Pakistan, a neighboring country, and the Taliban, they have committed that they will not let their soil be used against the neighbors.
Well, as far as the Taliban commitment is concerned, once they are responsible for that, so then Afghan soil will not be used against any country. This is understood. And time and again they are pronouncing it through their various leaderships in various talks. It is a very solid commitment they have made to the neighbors as well as to the international community, and plus the focal point of the Taliban and the American deal was this particular aspect. That is one. Second thing is, presently the Taliban don't want to open another front against them. That is the Daesh, though they have fought previously and they are still
so their first priority is about the Afghan current government, right?
Exactly. Once they are responsible for the soil of Afghanistan, then I think, and what could be suitable are in the offing, that the Afghan soil will be turned into a scorched earth for these
But Brigadier
non-state
Saab, the point
actors.
is that whatever has started happening in Pakistan, there is a rise of terrorism activities, starting from the Lahore incident to so many other incidents, Quetta bombing. I mean, every other day we hear that something is happening. Our soldiers are in the line of fire. So many young officers are losing their lives, again in the line of duty. But, you know, perhaps not fighting the Indian soldiers, but the terrorists. Though there is a fifth generation warfare, the so-called the hybrid warfare, but says we are losing lives.
No, actually the Afghan government is completely, you can say, in nexus to the Indians.
That is what I'm saying,
That
sir.
is, and naturally their intelligence agency and plus their armed forces.
And look at the kind
and
of
their
statements by
police and
Amarullah
everything.
Saleh or
And plus
other
their
individuals.
media,
I mean,
and plus
not at all
their,
acceptable
you
by a
can
country
say
like Pakistan.
political figures
Yes.
are talking rather venomous statements are being given. Some are even degrading to be called even
Did you see that
political
tweet,
or
sir,
diplomatic.
of that
Yeah.
Jalniazis and when he
Yeah,
was...
yeah, so many.
Yeah, I mean,
that
what was that
their
supposed to be
tweets.
like? I mean, what a cheap man
exactly.
he is.
So that is one of the frustration. But at the same time, I must say that will, in this particular time where the end game has not reached to the solid grounds, for that matter, the Afghan situation, as long as it remains unstable, fluid, this sort of happenings will be taking place in Pakistan. Rather, I suppose the level will be escalated and at times it will come down, because now this is the time for the non-state actors as well as its abettors and its sponsors to prevail in this area that they are a force to reckon with, and they want to achieve whatsoever their objectives in this region are. That is the destabilization. And destabilization of Pakistan is of course the destabilization of China, because the
They have their
corridor is
own
there.
issues, yes.
Yeah, and more so that destabilization is even of Iran, because that is also bordering Pakistan. And third thing is, if Afghanistan is on the boil, and naturally if Pakistan is unstable, so what goes to the Central Asia? That is also, these things will ooze out from Afghanistan, will spread to on its border. That is another aspect. But as far as the TTP is concerned, I think that if the things are settled peacefully, even then there will be no place for these people, because the Afghan people as well as the government, because they have committed, they will be prevailing on them either to surrender or they will be wiped out. Or for that matter, then the neighboring country, especially Pakistan, could have that military strategy of hammer and anvil, that they will be pushed and they will be crushed in the process.
Brigadier Sir,
But more so, these things in the Balochistan as well as in our Fata area, and such sort of, you can say, bombing or destabilization or such sort of attacks will be taking place. One cannot completely
And it is
you
directly
can
linked
say-
with the situation in Afghanistan. Even the Americans have left. The Indians have, they have also lifted their
Let me say
members,
regarding
around
the-
3,106 people, Indians, I mean, according to them, were working in the various embassies and consulates. They've been airlifted, but there is a certain number still there. But they are panicking. The Indians are panicking.
I must conclude, rather summarize it in one sentence, that non-state actors in Afghanistan are their cronies, are their supporters, are abettors. They are the last straw on the camel back of India.
You wanted to add something?
And they are seeing losing the investment they have made so far.
A
Regarding
lot
the-
of articles, a lot of
Yeah.
blogs I've
Look at
heard
their
about it.
media, the way they are talking.
Yeah.
Oh my
3
God.
billion, as if
They are-
it
they
was
are-
300
they are-
billion they have spent.
And the thing which you are talking, the episodes in our country, the security situation, I guess the situation, the volatile situation in Afghanistan now has created a gray area in the region. So I guess this has been misused by the state actors, Afghan state actors and non-state actors. But once, as Sir said, when there's a peaceful deal between after intra-Afghan talks, I don't think that the TTP will be able to launch any offensive in our lands, because that's the guarantee. Another thing which you mentioned, I guess the Taliban are not against the Kabul regime, all of it. They are, Suhail Shaheen has clearly mentioned that we don't want to talk to Ghani, to Amrullah Saleh and Hamdullah Mohib. So there are, I guess, 3 people. in the
Exactly, anti-Pakistan
picture,
also, yeah?
So these 3 people, if they're out of the picture, and things are pretty much flexible.
But you know, another, let me be the devil's advocate here. Now, for example, let's suppose the Taliban, they end up having enough influence in Afghanistan that the TTP or other non-state actors, they realize that, you know, now whatever assignments they were given to perform, they cannot, no matter what. Plus, the fence is there now, almost 90-95% work has been done. So there's a lot of security on that part also. Refugees coming into Pakistan, yes, that is going to be a very serious concern, but I think we should prepare them just exactly the way Iranians did. But during the last couple of years, whether you talk about the Raymond Davis incident or a couple of other, you know, similar incidents, I would say, the soil of Iran, I'm not saying that the government of Iran is involved. Obviously, there's a new president now who's going to be the future supreme leader, also the same individual. So very important to have great relationship with Iran. But having said that, what if instead of Afghanistan, the RO starts using this other side? Because the border is again porous there, sir. It's not fenced either. Don't you think that is going to be another challenge and a half for us then?
So your comment, maybe?
Yes, sir. As far as Iran is concerned, they are equally worried about the RSS and more so this refugee problem.
That is going to happen, sir.
Yeah.
No matter what you
those
say.
things are there. More so.
And not 300 to 600,000. There will be in millions.
Both of Balochistan, both sides of the line of divide, they are in a situation which cannot be called flux, but it is a bit unstable, or there are unhappy elements or some extremist elements. So naturally, for that purpose, the international agency and especially the intelligence agencies are there to exploit that. Why this end game, the Americans are not completely committing, that they have left the area. They say we have left Afghanistan, not the area, not the region. That is very important factor. And that factor is
how will they make their presence
for Pakistan, for China, for Iran, and for the Central Asia. They don't want to
Question is, sir, how will they make their presence feel? There are hardly any soldiers there to look after the affairs. Is it through the technology? Is it through the aerial bombing? Or how?
If the soldiers
Because
were there, once the soldiers were there, the surge was there, 150,000 were there, what they did?
Nothing.
So what they will do?
I mean, the
The
threat is still
only
there.
thing is that these non-state actors, that what I say, this is the currency they will be using. These sort of, you can say, people who are a bit
The vulnerable
disjointed,
people. The vulnerable
that will
people,
be
basically,
used. Destabilization means that the area is kept in a flux in a way that the Chinese progress, especially on the BRI, and more so their
I think, sir,
influence
I believe,
moving towards
I really believe in one thing, and that is the Russians have a very important role. They have a score to settle also. You know, obviously it makes sense, and especially when Vladimir Putin is in power, and he's going to remain in power for a long time, and this man knows what he's saying, what he's doing. The former KGB chief, prime minister, president, military officer, and he's a commando kind of guy, you know, who is very
And
blunt. He's
continuity.
talking about the economic reforms also.
Very
Great man and
pragmatic.
continuity. What's the role of China? Because if they can, you know, pledge something like $400 billion, that is at least
Iran.
1.25 times the total economy of Pakistan for the next 20 years in Iran. maybe if they end up spending around 40 to 50 billion on the infrastructure of Afghanistan in the real way, not like the American way, don't you think, sir, there's going to be a different ball game? That is the last question, sir, because I was told to wrap it up. So quick comment from your minute comment. And
the
then
region itself, as far as its geostrategic location or political location is concerned, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, especially for China, it is too important. Rather, number one, for the China, the energy corridor, that energy for 25 years on freeze prices ensured supply, because Strait of Malacca and 10,500 kilometers, that will be gone. So now this corridor will be there. And moreover, the infrastructure developed in Iran of all that oil refineries, and more so there's these pipelines and all these things. So naturally, the Chinese will be, if they even spend $1 trillion in this area, I suppose that is not a big deal for them. Because
sir, within no time, they have actually spent a few dozen billion dollars in Pakistan. And it's visible.
Yeah, and more so, if Afghanistan becomes peaceful, it will prove or work as a bridge between the Central Asia and Pakistan.
And I think that is the ideal case scenario. But again, the West.
Yeah, of course, that is there. But who plays balance and who plays the game?
Who plays the cards wisely and smarter? In a smarter way. So
Beijing is explicitly playing a role in Afghanistan, but they also don't want to be pulled into the mess of Afghanistan. So they will play very pragmatically. And as the Chinese wisdom is, they will observe, and then they will strike when the iron is red hot.
Yeah, I mean that's what their philosophy is all about. I mean they always keep themselves, in a position where they won't be too loud, won't be too aggressive. But lately, I mean, they have also opened up when it comes to the statements for USA that USA is the cause of the problem in the region. So I think the Chinese are also, in fact, understanding the dynamics of the politics or the geopolitics of 2021. Anyway, thank you so much, Saddam Saab. It was a pleasure having you, and that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you tomorrow at 8. Till then, you take good care. Allah Hafiz.